Hi, I'm Carla Schaefer, Auntie Beads designer, and I will be demonstrating the square stitch. I'm going to go over the list of tools and supplies needed for this project. We'll be using a fire line. In this case, I'm going to be using the charcoal or gray color. I'm going to be using an 11/0 seed bead. This is a metallic iris blue. And I'm also going to be using a bugle bead, and this is a matte AB. And for the closure, I'm going to be using the new chessboard Swarovski button. You will need a number 12 needle and a pair of snips or nipper tools. Well, I just wanted to demonstrate the stitch using this 8/0 seed bead, just so maybe you could get a better idea how the stitch works before we get started. I'm going to be using an 11/0 and a bugle bead in the bracelet, so I wanted to demonstrate this so you can get a better idea how this works. I have just strung 6 beads on my thread here, and I used a stop bead to keep the beads from falling off the wire. So the first thing I'm going to do is I got the 6 strung, and I'm going to drop the first bead that I want to add to this row to make the second row. So what I've got here's the bead that I just dropped on, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle back through this last bead in the base row toward that bead you just strung. And as you can see how it just kind of, this bead I strung pops up and sits on top of that bead. And then I'm going to run my needle through that top bead and then pull snugly. And that is a square stitch. So again, I'm going to pick up my second bead. Drop it down to my work. Then I'm going to go back through the second bead in the base row. And again, that second bead sits on top of there, top of the bead in the base row, the second bead. Run my needle back through. As you can see, they're starting to stack up. Again, I'm going to pick up my third bead. Again, running my needle back through the third bead on the base row. And this is what we do in the square stitch. And what it does is it allows these beads to set on top of your other row. And you just continue this through the end of the row here. And then I'll show you how to turn to start your third row, and then we'll get started on the design of the bracelet. Just wanted you to have a good feel of how this works. In fact, as you get comfortable with it, you don't even have to wait till that bead drops down to your work. String it on. And you'll find little shortcuts that you like yourself, like if you want to flip your work when you move to the next row or not. It's kind of a personal preference. Okay. Now I've got the 2 rows complete, as you can see, and you can tighten them up. And then all we do for the start to third row is, again, just string a bead. Now, like I said, if you want to flip your work, which I'm going to go ahead and flip, I've strung my bead on. Simply going to run my needle back through that base bead, and so on. And this is the square stitch that we'll be using in the bracelet. Okay, now we're ready. After I've demonstrated the square stitch, we are now ready to start the bracelet. And I'm going to string on, first of all, let me explain. You need to have a stop bead, and I prefer to use a contrast color or at least size for your stop bead, and I like to leave a good amount, so 8 inches or more. I'd rather have more thread on the end than I needed than not enough. So string on your stop bead, and then we're going to string on our pattern for the first row. Actually, this will be for the whole bracelet. So I'm going to do 3 11/0s, a bugle, 1 11/0, a bugle, and 3 more 11/0s. And this is going to be the pattern and the width of the bracelet. And so this is going to be our base row. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up an 11-0, and I'm going to move my work so that I can work from this end. So I'm going to pick up I've picked up an 11-0, and I'm going to string back through this first bead or last bead strung, however you want to look at it. Until that bead sits on top. Run my thread back through that bead. In this case, all that we are square stitching are the 11-0s. We are just, that bugle bead is not going to be square stitched. Okay, I've got my second bead strung. Going to bring my needle up through the second bead in the base row. And then I'm going to bring my needle through that second bead. I'm going to pick up my third 11-0, run it back through that third 11-0 on the base row. And then the work can get a little loose until you get it, that, say, first 2 or 3 rows really done. So as you need, just push your stop bead up. Okay, now you can see that I've got the 3 stacked on top of one another. All I'm going to do is string on a bugle bead and an 11-0. And then I'm going to string back through this 11-0 in the middle. Not the bugle, just the 11-0. And then back through the 11-0. You want to be careful not to get your threads tangled up. You want to make sure it stays on top of your work until you pull it through. And again, I need to tighten this up. And then I'm going to string on another bugle bead and another 11-0. And work my stitch through this 11-0 on the base row.